time ago. So long ago, in fact, that the earth was formless. It was nothing, absolutely nothing, except darkness and water. And it's a little bit misleading to say it was a long time ago, because in fact, time hadn't been invented yet. There was no time. It was just the darkness, just the water. And then at some point, a great spirit spoke some words, rang out a voice that said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And said, "Let there be land," and there was land. Let there be sky, with the sun and the stars and the moon, and there was sky. It's an interesting thing about that sky. The sky was almost as if it was a great big dome made of crystal. Creating the sky, and beyond that dome was still the water. It was keeping those cosmic waters out. And within that dome was the stars, and the moon, and the sun. And the voice said, "Let there be animals," and there was animals. "Let there be plants and trees," and there was plants and trees. And then, that great spirit had an idea. It was a good idea to create a new being. And the voice rang out and said, let us create a being in our image. And so it was that we came around. Human beings, our species. Our species came into existence. And it was a good idea, it was a good thing. Well, for a while. Well, you know how we are. You know how people are. Well, we multiplied, and we multiplied, and we multiplied, and we spread out, and we spread out, and we multiplied. And then we started to do things, not very good things. We started to abuse each other. Humans started to abuse other humans. Started abusing animals and the land. Constantly abusing the very land that was created. And each other. And this frustrated Great Spirit. The Great Spirit was very disappointed. And started thinking maybe it wasn't such a good idea to bring these people, these beings around. And started thinking maybe it's time to wipe the slate clean. To start anew, to start over. Maybe I'll bring down some waters, have a great flood, destroy everything. Start anew. And it seemed like a good idea, except for one thing. There was one person, one single person, out of everyone, that Great Spirit took a liking to. His name was Restful Comfort. Restful Comfort. Maybe that's why Great Spirit liked him. He felt comfortable in his presence. I don't know. But he didn't want to see Restful Comfort and his family destroyed. So instead, Great Spirit came down and spoke to Restful Comfort, saying, "I'm very displeased with the way things are. I'm going to bring a great flood through. But I'm going to save you and your family. And what I want you to do is build a great vessel. I'll tell you exactly how to build it. It will survive this flooding. And when that vessel is built, I want you to go out and collect 7 of every animal that is pure. 7 of every animal that is pure, meaning I like that animal for sacrifice. And collect 2 of every animal that is not pure. It is these animals that will survive, along with you. And with that, Great Spirit gave Restful Comfort the instructions on how to build the vessel. And Restful Comfort began. Now you gotta understand something. You gotta understand something. Back then, this was a while ago, back then people lived maybe a little bit longer than we do now. You know, I mean, now, you know, we live 80, 90, 100, over 100. Oh, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Back then, you know, people lived to be, I don't know, like 7, 8, 900 years old. So maybe it wasn't so far-fetched, or maybe it wasn't so crazy that it took Restful Comfort 120 years to build this vessel. 120 years. I don't know if there's any boat builders in this room. It sounds like a long time to build a boat. You know, around here it takes them, you know, a few years sometimes to build a boat or so. 120 years. But it was a sacred vessel, right? It was a sacred vessel, and sometimes sacred vessels take time. And so Restful Comfort began building the vessel, according to the instructions that Great Spirit, you know, had passed on. And so we built, and so we built, and so we built. And while he was building, of course, the people, they would come, they would be curious. What is it? What is it that you're building? You know, and he would explain that in some time in the future, there might be this flood, and maybe everything will be destroyed, and maybe, just maybe, if they change their ways, they too can be saved. Well, people didn't like hearing that. They didn't like hearing that. No one likes to be told what to do. So they would hear something like that. You know what they would do? They would beat him up. They would kick him. They would punch him. They'd call him names. He would endure all of this abuse for 120 years. He was enduring this abuse while he was building this vessel. Well, the time passed, the time passed, the time passed. And finally, he was putting that last nail in, or whatever it was, you know, finishing up the vessel. And he went out and collected all the supplies and all the food that would be needed for a great journey. He put them on the ship. And then he went out to collect all the animals. 7 of all the ones that are good for sacrifice, 2 of all the others, male and female, and brought them all on board. Each and every species of animal. And at that point, as the animals were coming on board, the rain started to fall. And the rain started to get harder and harder and harder. And this wasn't like some of the other rains. I mean, it was coming down. It was coming down, and some of the people in the village where Restful Comfort was started thinking, oh, maybe there was something to what he said, what he's been doing this whole time. But it was a little late. It was a little late. And Restful Comfort sealed that door. The Great Spirit put a special seal on it of protection. And then the rains really started to fall. And they fell, and they fell, and they fell, and the rains came, and the rains came, and the rains came, and it fell, and it fell, and it fell. And some of you may be thinking that this was, you know, like a really bad thunderstorm. Some of you may be thinking that this was like any kind of rain that any of us have ever experienced. But I tell you this, it wasn't. You know why? Remember that dome I told you about? That great glass dome keeping out the cosmic waters? Well, that dome became a little more permeable. And it was those waters that started to come down. It was those waters that started to flood. It was those waters that started to rain down. We are talking a cosmic catastrophe. We are talking the flood of all floods. And it came down, and it came down, and it came down. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained. It rained. And it rained. 40 days and 40 nights that water fell. 40 days and 40 nights that water fell. 40 days and 40 nights it rained, and it rained, and it rained. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? All that destruction? I don't know. I don't know. You know, sometimes I do know that we need a good cleansing, right? Sometimes I know that that's important in our own lives, to find that space, to allow that deep cleansing, to allow that deep flooding of the cosmic waters to come through us. And it's an interesting thing. This isn't the only story about a flood. Cultures all over the planet, all over the world, had stories of a great flood. On this very land we're on right now, they had a flood story, where a great spirit was not happy with how humanity was behaving and brought the waters down. And there was one then as well who wanted to be saved, who was appropriate to be saved. And so in this story, he shot an arrow up into the clouds, and then shot another arrow into that one, and another one into that one, and another one into that one, until a great ladder was made. And climbed that ladder, him and his family, into the clouds. And in that way he was saved. There's another story not too far away from here, where there was also a great flood. And in that story they built great canoes to save the people and the animals. Way over in the northeastern part of this continent, there's a story about the ice giants in Kuloskai, who tricked all the giants. And the giants were eating all the people, and Kuloskai tricked them and showed that he was a more powerful wizard, and brought the great floods to come down and turn them all into fish. Giant fish. Flood stories all over the place. Flood stories, because the rain came down. The rain came down. 40 days and 40 nights the rain came down. Until finally, it was that day. That day when the boat stopped rocking wildly back and forth, and everything became still. Everything became still. And Restful Comfort went up and opened up a window and looked out. And everywhere he looked, in every direction, all he saw was water. And for a year and a day, they just floated in that water. Just floated in that water. And Restful Comfort and his wife, whose name was Pleasant One, cared for all the animals. They sang to the animals, they fed the animals. They helped heal the animals when that was needed. And at night, they kept each other company, singing each other songs, reading each other poems, telling each other stories. For a year and a day, a year and a day. one day, after much time had passed, Restful Comfort went and got a raven, and went up into that window and let the raven go to see if the raven would find land. And some say that the raven just flew around the ship, not wanting to leave. Others say that the raven flew off and never returned. But after some days, Restful Comfort went and got a dove and sent the dove out the window. You know what? A few days later, the dove returned with an olive branch. An olive branch. Land! There was land! Can you believe it after all this time? An olive branch! That must mean land is nearby. And sure enough, a few days later, that sacred vessel that had been on the water all that time, carrying the only survivors that were land dwellers of the great flood, returned onto land. And when they got onto land, the door opened up, and all the creatures, and Restful Comfort and Pleasant One and their children and their children's wives, all went out onto the land. They threw themselves on the ground. They kissed the ground, the beautiful land, and they celebrated. They celebrated their return. They created a great feast, a great celebration. And above them, you know what? There was a rainbow, a giant, beautiful rainbow, a sign from Great Spirit. That Great Spirit was most pleased. And a promise that never again would there be a flooding like this. And so underneath that rainbow, the people celebrated, the animals celebrated, and I must also tell you, underneath that rainbow, everyone, all the creatures, all the people also started making love. All night long, all day long, they made love. They had to repopulate the world. They had to repopulate. And so, there was that sweet love making. And sweet celebrating their survival. Now, does the story end here? No. The story continues, and it's not always easy, and it's not always pretty. But I'll tell you what, just for right now, let's leave them there. Let's leave them underneath that rainbow, engage in that love-making, engaged in that feasting and celebrating. Let's let them linger there for a while. And for this storyteller, at this time, I just need to say that this is all I know.